Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. And keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as, investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are on Tuesday, April 16th. We're going to take a look at United Airlines today. So with earnings coming up, I thought we'd come and see where UAL might find some support or resistance, whether it booms or busts, and certainly where it might just sort of like hug if it does move relatively sideways based on the reaction to earnings. Now, I do want to briefly mention this period when it was up in high 50s in July of 2023, and then the steep downfall that it caught a bottom here at 33.68 in late October of 2023. So I know that's sort of many months ago at this point, but I do want to bring it up just because the price action that has been put in since then, and that where we find ourselves today, does still fall within the shadow of that really large downturn that took place through that period. And you see, it certainly has capability and a history of these steep fall-offs and drawdowns, and then sort of like operating in the shadow. I mean, it's still operating in the shadow of this drawdown, even when it had that push up to 58 last summer. So, in any case, headed into this earnings at this moment, we do see another drawdown here. So we see on this day alone down over 3.5%, and then several days of 3% down. And so it basically shed this 48.56 level, right? It wicked off of there and then fell down through this 46.17, tried briefly to hold 42.19 and then slipped below, and then a near wick miss just today on the low 40.10 of this 39.86 level that we have in the chart. So it is sort of headed into earnings having lost a decent percentage in stock price. Now, to me, that sort of can be a double-edged sword. Keep in mind, this is all going to sort of be on most importantly, the actual nuts and bolts of the report. So what the report says, it's the dominant force here, right? But then there's always the secondary component, which is the sentiment, which is the reaction. How is the market feeling about what it sees in the report as it sort of like incorporates that into the stock price and the recent stock action. So that's why I say there's been a drawdown recently, and that could mean sometimes there's sort of like a relatively on par or flat report, or even sometimes sort of a mildly negative report, right? Sort of maybe a little bit of a miss here, but sometimes then you see still the stock climb on something that otherwise would be seen as maybe a little bit of a negative in the report. Similarly, a stock has shot up a lot headed into earnings, and you get on par, or you get maybe even a slightly better than on par report, and the stock can still drop because folks can feel like, hey, this has been priced in, it's been overly priced in, and so we're going to drop it back down to where we feel it needs to be. So we'll see how this sort of blend happens between what the report actually says and this recent drawdown in price, and if the overall market feels that it's warranted, or if it was overdone, or if it was drawn down for really good reason and it needs to continue in that direction. So let's tackle that first. If it does drop, right now we're at 41. We're pretty late in the day right now, so I don't know that we'll move a ton off of that, but 39.86 is the nearest in support level that I see, 38.31 and 37.23 if it drops further. Now, if it loses 37.23, 35.03. I tried to pull in what I felt were the strongest levels. There's certainly going to be some more sort of micro or granular levels in between these, but I didn't want to clutter the chart too much, and I wanted to cover a lot of ground in case it does have a big reaction in either direction. I wanted to cover, really big percentage gains and losses. Now, if it moves relatively sideways, we may see it pinning itself between this 39.86 to 42.29. Relatively similar to where it is now. It's near-ish the middle of that. If we take this as just over 42 and just under 40, right about 41 is, pretty in the center. So 41 or so if it does kind of pin, and maybe some batting around between these levels. Now, if it does climb and it has a good reaction, positive reaction, 42.29, then we do have quite a bit of space here. There's probably a level here around 43.80. I'm not going to put it in. It's a little janky. It's a little thin, a little herky-jerky. So again, I'm just trying to rely on the strongest levels, but I wouldn't be shocked if it does climb a little bit off of earnings. Maybe 43.80 comes into play. Now, if it really decides to shoot up 46.17, 48.56, and then 50.58. Not saying that it has to cover all of this ground if it does have a big reaction. Not saying it's going to go all the way up to 50 or all the way down to 35, but the trickle effect, the downstream effects in the coming days and weeks, if it continues in a direction off of that initial reaction, then we might see it sort of play out the full breadth of the scope here of the levels that we have. Now, on the think or swim side of things, you see a pretty big pickup in bearish momentum. So histogram showing strong motion, bearish momentum, a lot of bearish momentum coming in. To me, something to sort of like make note of. I do also acknowledge that something as a catalyst as big as earnings can just sort of like throw everything askew. And so you could be having strong motion in one direction, the report comes out, the reaction blends with the report, and it just sort of like immediately interrupts, the direction that it was going, or the pattern that it was playing out. So take that for what you will, but it is strong pickup in bearish momentum. Now that said, it is also trying to catch support right now today off of the lower bound of the channel. That lower bound of the channel at 40.56 at the moment, and we'll see if it's able to maintain its in-channel range based off of the reaction to earnings. So if it does, 40.56 to the downside, 43.53 is the mid-range of the channel, that bright blue line, and then 46.50 is the upper bound of the channel. So the channel itself covers quite a bit of ground percentage-wise. The sort of like fly in the ointment of that is that it is situated all the way at the lower bound of the channel. So it doesn't have much room to move to the downside and stay within the channel. So if it does slip out, that would be its sort of like nearest exit point, if you will. But if it does have sort of like a mildly positive, but not like super crazy reaction, something like coming up and trying to retest the mid-range of the channel based off of the reaction to earnings at 43.53 wouldn't be something super wild. If it does slip out of the lower bound of the channel on a negative reaction, then eventually we'll look for it to come back into the channel and see what it does when it re-engages. You see this lengthy period here and that big drawdown that we were looking at, the shadow under which we're still playing out. But you see falling out and then just spending a bunch of time out here, not even wicking off of, but full candle body off of the wave cloud itself. So not even being able to reach the mid-range of the channel here, which often just means there's more momentum in that direction to have to exhaust before it's going to be able to either stabilize or reverse. Certainly see that playing out here. And then when it sort of curled a little bit itself back into the channel, that's when it was able to retest the mid-range of the channel and then started to get some motion to the upside. And that's sort of like where we find ourselves today. Although, like I said, we have had this recent drawdown heading into earnings. So we'll see what happens, but we've covered ground 35 up to 50. And it should be an interesting one, but always keep in mind, of course, that it could go relatively flat and folks could kind of shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, I think this is about where it should be. And we'll know soon enough. All right, folks, I hope that your trading week is off to a good start. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.